Hi, welcome to Fish. First I seek Him, and my name is Linda. So, many things, and I mean many things, can masquerade as the real thing, but fail upon closer inspection, right? I mean, it's just, you take a look at it and it's not what you think it is. Now, Jesus had to deal with this, and He deals with this mismatch in a very shocking episode in the Gospels. The cursing of the fig tree. Matthew 21:18-22, Mark 11:12-14, and 20-25. So in this inverted miracle, if you will, we see precisely the stakes of not only of failing to produce fruit, but of giving a fruitful impression and failing to back it up. All right, so let's go to the Bible and what is surrounding this whole story about the fig tree. So the scene is Jesus. He's entering Jerusalem, and it is just, they are loving him, right? Remember, he enters Jerusalem, it's Passover, and the masses are gathered there, and it's in the morning, and he has traveled from Bethany, and he, on his way to Jerusalem, he spots a fig tree. And this fig tree is in leaf, okay? Air quotes around it, in leaf. And at this point in late spring, okay, most fig trees haven't developed what you would say is a mature fruit. Mark 11:13. But this particular tree draws the attention of Jesus because it has already a full covering of leaves. So it's an early bloomer. Its foliage, if you will, signals that it should have early figs. With that expectation, Jesus, he goes over and he inspects the tree. And he is immediately disappointed. All leaves and no fruit. And all expectation and no satisfaction. And in a shocking turn, Jesus curses the tree and makes it wither from the roots, never to yield fruit again. So this is kind of what we may think out of character for Jesus, right? I mean, we're a little bit taken aback by this. I mean, Jesus, isn't he the child welcomer and the compassionate healer and the guy who calms all the storms? And here he is just a tree, right? Well, or is it? What are we supposed to learn from this? What are we supposed to gain from this? What is Jesus saying in all this? So on the surface, right, the lesson is, well, on powerful prayer. The power of faithful prayer, even more so. Matthew 21:20-22. But yeah, okay, but there's more going on behind the scenes. There really isn't. I mean, the fig tree cursing, an enacted parable of sorts, is also a sober warning for us today in two ways. And yes, it is. Okay, so number one, fruitlessness leads to judgment. Yes, it does. Throughout the Old Testament, Israel is described as God's vineyard, tree, or planting. Judges 9:8-15, Isaiah 3:14, Jeremiah 12:10, Ezekiel 7:2-10, and quite a few more. As any Israelite knew, the first fruits of the harvest belong to God. Exodus 23:19, Nehemiah 10:35-37, which helps us conceptualize their relationship to God as his own special planting. They must yield spiritual fruit as his covenant people. Now, hang in there with me. This really gets good, all right? Psalms 1:3, Jeremiah 17:8, 10. Israel's fruitfulness, now literal or otherwise, is not the basis of their relationship with God, for it is God who gives fruitfulness. Deuteronomy 7:13, 28, 4. A lack of fruitfulness is a sign of God's curse for the rebellion. Deuteronomy 11:17. Yeah. So this foundational metaphor for Israel's spiritual health vividly blooms in the prophetic era. Oh yes, it does. The Bible is a book of prophecy. The time has come for God's people to yield fruit that would bless the world. Isaiah 27:6. And several times the prophets, describe God as inspecting Israel for early figs as a sign of spiritual fruitfulness. Micah 7:10, Jeremiah 8:13, Hosea 9:10, 17. But he finds no first ripe fig that my soul desires. So in two exiles, the Assyrian and Babylonian, God pours out the curse of barrenness, Hosea 9:16, and Israel becomes a rotten fig, Jeremiah 29:17. So all is not lost though. No, it is not. God promises to one day replant Israel and produce healthy figs from her again. Joel 2:22, Amos 9:14, Micah 4:4, Zechariah 8:12. With this web, of background images, light bulbs, right? You would think light bulbs would have immediately gone off in the minds of Jesus' disciples as he reenacted Israel's history by cursing the fig tree. All right? This they knew. They know the fig tree. So, the fruitless fig tree draws us back to prior points in Jesus' ministry when God's people were called to produce spiritual fruit. And Jesus has pursued the children of God with compassionate seriousness. And the Jewish crowds gathering to celebrate God's past act of redemption, Passover, Exodus, right? They have just hailed Jesus as what? King. While he leads a new Exodus on a meaning-laden donkey. Zechariah 9:9. So this spiritual restoration has arrived, right? And everything is lining up here. Okay, we got the fig tree, we got Passover, we got Jesus on the donkey, we have the crowd going crazy, calling him king. So everything is lining up here. Israel's fruit will now be harvested. Blessings will now pour forth. And while the rest of the nations, the other fig trees, are not yet in season, this one tree is in leaf. And both Matthew and Mark, by sandwiching the fig tree episode, they focus a lens on where it would all transpire, and that is Jerusalem. All this is going to transpire in Jerusalem. So Matthew writes it this way: Jerusalem, fig tree, Jerusalem. And Mark has it fig tree, Jerusalem, fig tree. Okay? With one exception. Except there's no fruit. The fig tree, once again, has failed. It is a fail. The Passover celebration the tumult, the crowds, the singing, the excitement. It's all what? It's a show. It is just simply a show. And Jesus, okay, if we remember our Bibles correctly, Jesus enters God's house of prayer and finds it a den of robbers. Mark 11:17. So there's lots of action here. A lot of action. And there's lots of bustle, but guess what? No righteousness. Leaves, but no fruit. So upon inspecting the fruitless tree, Jesus pours out divine judgment via 2 sign acts. The future pointing out of cursing the temple, and the enacted metaphor of cursing the tree. So there we are. Number 2. Maybe you want to think about your own figs. Yeah? All is not lost. So when the disciples asked Jesus to explain what just happened, he talks about prayer. He literally pivots and he talks about prayer. And you're thinking, well, why? Well, because though they do not yet fully understand, they will be the new caretakers of God's people. Matthew 21:33-45. They will be instruments by which Israel is transformed when the Jewish nucleus of Christ followers extends branches worldwide and brings forth fruit from all nations. And this begins in Acts. And as Jesus teaches here, they will do this by the power of faithful prayer. The power of faithful prayer. And thus the fig tree cursing is not just about historical Israel. It's about us. It's about all the people of God throughout time. Now, the Old Testament expectation that God's covenant people bear fruit did not wither on that road between Bethany and Jerusalem when that poor fig tree met its fate. In fact, the mandate that God's people bear spiritual fruit has actually intensified in the new era. It did not weaken. And not to earn God's guarding affection, but to yield that which He has made us to do. A whole different ball game. So this passage does not just remind us that as a believer or a Christian by definition must produce spiritual fruit, even if it's just small early figs, but it's also about the threat of and temptation towards false pretenses of fruit, right? Like you're faking it. I mean, the fig tree, like the bustling temple courts during Passover, was just really putting on a good show. Oh my goodness, it looked great, but there was nothing. No substance, no faith, no righteousness. And that made it all the worse. It's one thing to lack fruit out of season. It's another thing to lack it while you're pretending to have it. It's called lying. So let us be warned. I mean, our personal lives, right? How many people do you know? Or maybe yourself. Our personal lives could look like we are in leaf, and our leaves may look beautiful. I mean, you know, you're a great parent and you win at life and you have a perfect family and you have a huge scheduled calendar of all these ministry appointments, but your roots may be withered. I mean, there's no fruit of holiness, right? I mean, there's no intimacy with God. And what's worse, our leaves may fool even us. Oh yeah. You may have some self-deception going on there. And guess what? Churches can do the same. A church leaves may look impressive. You know, it's packed, the music is good. I mean, the pastors are like awesome. But will God, well, what would he find upon closer inspection? Will he find only leaves, or will he find figs too? And we have to remember one thing. What is in a fruit? Seeds. We are to spread the seeds. You can't do that if all you have is leaves. Just remember that. In the fruit is leaves, and we are to take, seeds, and we are to take those seeds and spread the message, the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's not about looking good. Not about that at all. Well, that's it for fish. First I see Kim. My name is Linda. And until next time.